Welcome, everybody. My name is John Cadenhead. I'm the Senior Director of Tutor Services here at Applerouth Tutoring. We're going to be talking about how to help your middle school, high school, potentially even college students, maybe elementary school students too, but mostly that middle school, high school, college range students not feel like they or you feel like they are falling back into old patterns, into old habits, into not preparing ahead for the next semester. Because as we all know, the stress of school is that it continues to build on itself, right? And so we got to make sure we can avoid what we call the summer slide. The first thing to do is stay away from those old metal slides. They're very rusty and they get very hot in the summer. No, that was my bad joke to start. We're not talking about those kind of slides. Excuse me. So let's go ahead and get started. We have 3 goals for today. We're going to talk about how do we set goals for the summer? What does it look like to do that? How do we stick to them? We're going to look specifically about in those goals, what does learning look like? What are learning opportunities and how do we incorporate those into our goals? And then we're going to think ahead, like what does it look like to prepare for college, to be thinking about college, even as a freshman or sophomore or junior or even senior, rising senior. During the summer, what are the things we should be doing to stay on top of it? And how do we make sure we don't overwhelm our lives just thinking about that next step of the puzzle? So we'll go ahead and get started. If you have any questions at any point in time, please feel free to throw them in the question and answer box. That's the easiest way I'll see them. I will make sure I answer them if not in the moment at the end of our webinar. So we'll go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to hit is that elephant in the room, that summer goals, trying to plan what does the summer look like, where should we put our energy, will most always look different between the parent and the student's point of view. And there will probably be some tension, some headbutting about that. I have definitely, for all the students I've ever worked with, for myself, for my son now, trying to set goals for what does it look like to help that student be successful versus what do they want to do over the summer are going to be different, right? So what does it matter for a parent? Well, most of the time the answers I get are I want them to continue to grow. I want them to have those opportunities to learn and become more of an adult, I guess, is the way to think about it, right? Whereas when I ask a student what matters, the answer is it's summer. I want to have fun. I want to do stuff with my friends and enjoy myself because I don't have to worry about school right now. So please don't put school back into my head. And so that tension of like, how do we find a middle ground between these two things? And how do we make sure we do it in a way where like the student doesn't react like this kid up here in the picture of like rolling their eyes and not wanting to talk to their parents about it at all. And so the easiest first step here is to make that conversation a conversation and also make it in a way where the student feels like they have the ability to speak their mind, right? It's easy to have a student push back if they feel like they're being directed to do something when they don't feel like they have the control over it. So the easy version of that is let's go to them and say, this is something we do need to talk about and something we need to plan for the summer. So we don't need to do it right now, but I do think we need to do it within the next 2-3 days, week, whatever you think is the right time frame for that. When would be the best time to do so? Like go ahead and plan it, schedule it out like it's a meeting at work or something like that, because that allows the student to recognize that it's something they need to do. They can start to plan ahead for it and they can put their list together of their thoughts ahead of time. And they also feel like they will have more of a control of the situation than being blindsided when they think they're about to go do something else, like play video games or hang out with their friends or watch a TV show or something, and the parents come in and want to have that conversation, right? The end result is going to be a lot better if both parties come into the same time period and the same thought process with, we need to talk about this. Let's go through the thought process of it. And in that, right, part of it is what are we going to do during summer, but also what are your goals during the summer? And so let's talk about how do we make good goals? What does a good goal system look like? Well, most people have heard of these terms, the SMART goals, right? So SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. Excuse me. So as we think about how do we set up good goals in those particular realms, the question is to bring to the student, like, what are things that you want to do over the summer? What are ways that you want to grow over the summer? And what are ways that you want to grow in the world of your education over the summer, right? And so asking them in these terms, like instead of saying, I want to read a lot of books, reading a lot of books isn't going to be an measurable goal, right? Let's lay out what does that actually look like in terms of each of the pieces of the puzzle in those ways. And then setting goals for like what we can do in that capacity as we move forward. My sentence sort of fell apart as I went through that. So let me see if I can do a better job of what I was trying to say. So setting goals that we can clearly see as measurable and setting them with a time base, I think are the two things that are harder for students most of the time. Like they can recognize that we need to do something specific. We need to, read these books that we need to do for school, or I should do, I should go in Khan Academy and work on videos, but knowing how many videos, knowing how often to do it, knowing how to mark off and track that they're doing those things, those are the pieces of SMART goals that I think are helpful for both parties together to sort of think through how that piece goes. And that the goal should also reward creativity and growth, right? Is not only recognizing like, I want to do 3 videos of Khan Academy a day, all day, every day on the summer. Like that's A, kind of crazy. And B, not necessarily thinking about like, how are we growing from that? What's the goal of going to those videos on Khan Academy? Is it just going to be that I'm going to turn on videos and stare at them and not really pay attention to what I'm doing? Or what I'm learning from it? I'm just going to watch random videos, or is it going to be more of like, I'm going to do these videos because I want to pre-game and prepare ahead of time for this math class that I'm taking, or whatever the case may be. Then we're making them more specific, and we're also making them things that we can actually see growth from. And I think the creativity side of it's important too, right? And so it's not as much, let's say this sentence better. It's about learning how to grow education wise, but it's also learning how to grow person wise, right? And so one of my goals, or one of my son's goals that he has set and shown me over the summer, is he wants to create his own comic book. And I think that's really awesome. It's probably not the most useful thing, right, in terms of his education, but it is a really great opportunity to be creative and learn like strategies for building something yourself from the ground up, figuring out how to print it, figuring out how to like bring it and sell it to his friends and stuff like that. Those are all big pieces of the puzzle that are a lot of work, but learning how to do that from the ground up, I think, is kind of cool. And the other thing that's important is that if you have multiple kids, figuring out how do we differentiate those goals between the kids and also make them feel like one kid doesn't have easier things and less things they have to do over the summer, right? Especially if we've got a slight age difference between those two kids. Like, if you've got a 3rd grader and a 7th grader, they've got a big difference in terms of expectations on what you would want them doing over the summer. And the 7th grader can easily feel like they're stuck with a lot more just brunt work than the 3rd grader if we don't clearly explain what our goals are for each and why we have them. Sorry about that. I think that's going to be a big piece of the puzzle too. So here are some goals. I was talking to some of my students, and here's sort of where we landed with a few different goals, right? So I've got a few kids who are working on getting their driver's license, so practicing driving 3 times a week, getting my Eagle Scout project scheduled out, planned ahead for the fall, practicing soccer 4 times a week, learning how to play guitar, learning how to bake a cake, practicing journaling weekly, cleaning my room once a month. That's a very good one. Hopefully more than that, but at least that's something. Cleaning up, selling some stuff I don't need, cleaning, the craziness of my room, decluttering my computer files. I like that one a lot. Right, where we very much into decluttering our personal physical space, but decluttering our computer space, I think, is an important one too that we forget about. Learn how to manage emails better. That's really, really handy for students to learn. And the summer is a great time to figure that out, because if they can't keep track of what's coming in, emails are a very common way for people to be talking to them. And, as they grow up, they're going to need that skill. And then setting up a savings account. That's a good one too. So I like that there's a variety of them. I like that some of them are one-off, just tasks that will be really important to do. And some of them are repetitive things that they want to incorporate into their daily routine or weekly routine or whatever. But being able to set different goals, I think, is important. So here's a reflection moment that you can use when sitting down with your students and talking through what should we be doing? What does it look like? So some of the questions you can ask, where am I now in terms of my academic growth? What am I good at? What do I enjoy? What classes do I feel comfortable in? And what do I struggle with? So where should I put my energy? Where do I want to be? Do I want to be different? Am I happy with where I am in my classes? Am I happy with where I am in some of my classes, but not all? And then what do I need to do to get there? What's my motivation? How do I think ahead and care so that when I go into, for me, French was the thing that I struggled the most with in high school. So like planning ahead over the summer to get more comfortable in French class, trying to learn how to read in French, trying to learn more vocabulary in French, all those pieces were part of my motivations because I didn't want to fall behind in that specifically. And I knew that it would be easy to. So then the other half of the battle, right, is that we have figured out how to have that preliminary conversation with our students. We have figured out what are some SMART goals that we can be setting and thinking ahead for. But then the problem is they're not going to be perfect at it. It's not going to work perfectly. There's going to be moments where we're going to feel frustrated that they're not moving forward on their goals and working on their tasks over the summer. And they feel like they're in a good spot. So how do we avoid butting heads, if you will? What can we do to plan ahead for the fact that that could be coming up? So in that capacity, some of the stuff that we should be thinking about is, well, what does it look like, the physical and the mental and the planning ahead in terms of what the students can be doing to make sure that they're in a good headspace and successful space to get through their goals and their tasks, right? One of those pieces that I'm a big proponent of is having a personal space for the actions you're doing, right? In school, when you come home and you do your homework and you do your studying, having a specific area of your house, of your room, of wherever it is, that is designed only for this task. It's not designed for also playing video games. It's not designed for also, social media or whatever, but this is where I sit down and this is where I do my schoolwork. How do we recreate and use that moment to continue the process of like, this is where I sit down and work on whatever tasks are specific for this, right? So probably not learning to play guitar or soccer, but the journaling, the learning how to organize my emails and computer systems and stuff like that, whatever it specifically is that's more school oriented, how do we continue the same physical location process to do that? So we're not, sitting on our bed doing that. And then building out a daily routine, right? So I'm a big fan of routine. I think that you can go a little too crazy with routine, right? Because it is summer, so we should have some freedom to it. But building in like, what does it look like? What should I be doing every day? And then when is it going to happen? I think is the big piece of it, right? So the biggest part is like, let the students build their own schedule. Don't go in and say like, okay, Jimmy, here's what you're doing today. Here's your plan of action. You'll probably want to tell them like, hey, you got a doctor's appointment today, or you need, you got your driving lessons at 1 o'clock or whatever it is, but allowing them to learn how to build out a schedule, learn how to build out, well, I wake up at 10 o'clock, and that might be a little too early over the summer, but I wake up at 10 o'clock, I'll eat breakfast, I'll do these things. And at 11 o'clock, I want to spend 30, 45 minutes, whatever it is, with this specific task. And I want to do that every other day over the summer, or whatever the specific need is. So planning ahead for that. Also looking ahead at your schedule for what vacation you have coming up, or what camps you have coming up, or what other extracurriculars that the student will be in, so that they're not, saying, well, like it's June 20th right now, and I don't go back to school till August 1st. And that feels like a year from now, when really it's, 40 days from now. And I'm also going to be traveling for 15 of those 40 days. So now I'm only down to 25 days to get my books read, which 25 feels a lot less than 40, and 40 already feels like, not even recognizing, it feels like it's so far away till August 1st or whenever school starts for your students. So thinking about the daily routine, and also thinking about the weekly, and then the whole calendar routine. Sometimes what that means is go ahead and print out like and I'm a big fan of, let's print out like a whole month calendar for each of the months, and let's spell out when our trips are, so we can think about how many days we actually have to work off of. So here's an example of a study schedule. I built this with a student when they were doing online learning. So it's very focused on like regular routines of in-school information, right? It's probably a little too structured for what we're thinking about over the summer. But what the goal of here is that there's opportunity to focus on getting dressed and doing things to take care of your body, looking over your hard deadlines and expectations and things that you need to be doing sooner rather than later. And then not only specific homework time, but also breaks. So for every action that we have up there with a color, afterwards, we have about a 15-minute break where we're doing something very different to let us stretch mentally, to get exercise, to go outside, socializing, all those other pieces of the puzzle, but allowing for opportunities to flex your brain between different things. So we're learning more effectively instead of just like, all right, cool, I know I got a lot of work to do, so I'm gonna sit down for 3 hours and try to get this all done as fast as I can. It's going to be a more productive and happier work time if we're doing it this way. Right, so I think we kind of hit this, setting daily tasks over that week, but also thinking about what are the carrots, what's the encouragement that we're going to have to help us get it done, because knowing that August 1st or September whatever is right around the corner for school to start, that still feels like way too far away for us to be for students to be motivated. So what's the weekly carrot, or what's the quarterly, what's the bi-weekly carrot, or whatever it needs to be to get that student more motivated in the short term. So for my son, he gets to pick out dinner if he hits his goals for the week. And he definitely has very picky eater. So allowing him to pick out dinner is an exciting opportunity for him, because then he doesn't have to have vegetables in the dinner or anything like that. It motivates him. And along with that, thinking about, like we were just saying, those long-term projects. So if it is something like going back to that list, getting your Eagle Scout project ready, it's not a one day, one task thing to get that done. There's multiple steps that you're going to have to be planning for, including talking to people about it, getting people to sign off, figuring out what it is, getting feedback of your drafts and re-editing them. So planning ahead, like what are all the tasks that you'll have to do to achieve this? What are you going to need to do, and how do we go ahead and block those off and work around our schedule of any trips or anything we have like that too. So one of the big things that I push students for is that no matter what, no matter how busy or simple your life feels, when you're getting ready in the morning, not when you're first waking up, but when you're getting ready in the morning, sitting down and reviewing, what are your hard deadlines? What are the things that you have to do today? What are the things you have to do in the next few days? And how do you make sure that you're planning ahead, not just for the rest of the day, but also for the rest of the week? And so what that looks like often is just taking out that calendar, looking at, well, what's all the stuff coming up? Is there anything that should be on here that I'm forgetting? And then how long are these things going to take me to do? And do I have enough time, and have I planned when that time is going to be to get these things done? So for one of those, right, I had a hard deadline of this presentation today. So planning ahead, like where am I fitting in the studying I'm going to do, the sitting down, talking to my students about it, the research, the building out these PowerPoints, practicing it, all those pieces of the puzzle had to be planned ahead. It wasn't just I can sit down and off the cuff talk about this stuff with you guys. So along with that, one of the things that I like to stress is the idea of we can try something new, but as humans, our gut reaction to something new is saying, no, I didn't like it. I don't want to do it. Right? You probably heard your students say that a lot. My son said that to me about dinner tonight, which was super fun. But the idea there is that it takes about 20 days. It takes a regular occurrence of something for over 2 weeks for you, almost 3 weeks, for you to get comfortable with a new system, whether that system be a regular practice of something, whether it be getting up early and having to go to, soccer practice super early in the morning, or studying a new topic, or committing to reading every day. It takes, a little less than a month to get there, where you're going to be in a good spot, and you're going to dislike it for a period of that time before you get used to it. And so recognizing that that's going to happen and it's normal, and you shouldn't quit just because it's happening, is very important. And that's one of the things that I stress heavily to students as we learn and try new systems. And along with that, you've probably heard this terminology because it's very popular and very important, is the idea of growth mindset. So the idea of growth mindset is that when you're looking at something that didn't go as well as you wanted it to in the past, there's two main ways you can reflect on it, right? How do I grow from it? How do I become better? versus that didn't work, I don't want to do it again, right? The negative, push it away, I don't feel comfortable with it, so I'll never want to be better at it, versus the and reflective, it didn't work, but I can do it better. So what are the things I need to do so, right? So darn, I made a mistake. Two options are, what can I learn from this? Or I am bad at this. What can I learn from this is a positive thing. It lets you feel like you control the outcome of something. It starts to help you think of different paths that you can take to be more successful, and you're less likely to struggle with it in the future. Versus the I'm bad at this, the fixed mindset is a negative thing. You're telling yourself you're bad at something, which will continue to be a negative reoccurrence conversation you'll have, and it wants you to give up, and you're going to struggle with it more as things continue. So how do we, as we're recognizing that we're struggling with something with a new system, go about it in that growth mindset thought process? That's important. And how do we present that to our students in a comfortable way? Well, the answer to that last question, I think, is important. It's like we should pregame it. When we're sitting down and talking about from the get-go, what are our plans for the summer? How do we make sure we're hitting our goals? Let's bring up that conversation of like, what does it look like when we're not? How is it okay? How do we reflect and recognize we're going to do it differently? How do we have a conversation in a comfortable way of like, I tried to do this and it didn't work, mom, dad, but I want to do it better next time. Like if my son came up and said that to me, I wouldn't care that he had a problem doing something. I would be really proud of him for the fact that he was reflecting on how do I become better, which I think is the thing to reward in that particular case. All right, so next fun topic. Tablets, screens, online, being on a computer as opposed to not. It's you can't stop it. It's going to be there, right? I think that the easiest thing that I have found is to let, again, that student bring the conversation up and ask the student what do they think is a fair amount, and how do they think that they will track it in a way where they're not just sitting down and watching it all day. Allowing them to bring their option to the table, and then you assessing is that option fair or not, because potentially they'll give you a good option. Like I have a lot of students who will give me less of them than what I was expecting them to. They're like, oh yeah, no, I should probably do like an hour a day max. And I was like, well, it's the summer, you can do more than an hour, it's totally fine. You can have some fun too. But having them recognize what's the appropriate amount, and then also asking them, how will we track it? Because saying like, I'm only going to watch an hour, but then not having a system to turn off or alarm to go off, or, parent to come say like, hey, you've been on this for this long, is important. I think that rewarding more screen time, depending on the student's age, can be a helpful thing as well. But I do think that taking away screen time can be a tricky thing. I'll let you decide with your students what makes the most sense, but I think going ahead and setting that expectation of, if things are not going well, what are the penalties, instead of just deciding in the moment what the right penalties are, makes the taking away option be more successful long term. The benefits of getting outside, we all know that going outside is a good thing to do, and that students should be doing that, but it doesn't mean they're going to be doing that as much as potentially you want. But it's always nice to just be quickly reminded that there are good benefits for going outside. You get some of that vitamin D, can lower blood pressure, reduce inflammation. I did not know that till I did this research. It's good for eyesight and improves sleep, and it burns calories. All those things are great. And also look at how much fun those kids are having. Looks like one of them isn't wearing shoes. All right, poor kids. In terms of reading and that side of the world, the other struggle I have when talking to parents is like, what's good reading and what should a kid be reading, and what should a kid not be reading? And my answer to that question is they should be reading, if they're reading something that's a plus. They should be reading. And so my rule is don't police their choices. If you feel like they're reading something that they shouldn't be, often that answer is like, it feels too simple, or it feels too like it's comic books and not, physical, like what's the word I'm looking for? Just a non-picture book. Allowing for them to do that, but also allowing it to be a conversation starter, right? And so asking them about what they learned from the book. What did they like about it? What new ideas did they learn? Did they learn some new words? What are the takeaways they had for that book? Will allow you and that student to have a conversation about it, instead of I don't think that's the right book for you, which will be the reaction of like, no, I disagree with you, I don't like that, and be upset. Yeah, and then setting a goal for like, what does it look like? How much should we be rereading this week? And then like, how do we track it? There's a lot of programs and libraries who will give you rewards for the reading list that you do. And I was always a big fan of those over the summer. And I think that those are good opportunities as well for students. And then make sure there's time for friends. Sorry, that was a bad joke. Apparently, all my students right now are watching Friends, that old TV show, which I think is really interesting that it is popular right now with high school students. But actual friends, they should be hanging out with actual friends is the takeaway there. Here's some other fun ideas, shorter ones. So freshman and sophomore summer programs, camps, travel, great opportunities. Paid programs on summer campuses probably won't have an impact for college. So if you're thinking like, I need to send my kid to Duke over the summer for them to be able to go to Duke in the future, that's not really going to help as much, but it could be helpful for the students to learn about college, to get excited about college, to build some skill sets and learn what it's like to live on a college campus. For juniors and seniors, jobs, internships, academic research, learning how to apply for a job, I think, is a really important skill set. And this is a great opportunity to learn how that process works so that when you're in college and when you're out of college, it's a lot easier than it is if you've never done it before. As a person who interviews lots and lots of people, I can definitely tell the people who have had the experience in interviews before and the people who are, this is a new world for them. And here's a fun list of just random ideas I had when brainstorming with students: learning how to code, have a water balloon fight, photo scavenger hunt, check out food trucks, make homemade ice cream, go on a college campus tour, volunteer at a food bank, start a photo day summer project, learn to play the ukulele, sew or crochet, write a comic book, go berry picking, take an online class from Khan Academy, take an SAT or ACT practice test for free. Hey, that's a great idea. Hold an outdoor movie night, clean up your room, hold a yard sale, write a short story, make a scrapbook, hold a bake sale, raise money, make a documentary. There's some fun stuff in here. Obviously, the idea is let's be creative. Let's find things that excite us and entertain us, and then figure out how to learn from it. How do we grow our skill set just by learning about it? All right, so that moves us into the second topic. We are faster in the second one, I promise. There's a lot to say in the first. How do we stay on top of our learning over the summer? What does it look like to actually be working on reading in a way that's useful for you long-term, right? One of those is the parent coming and asking the questions like we talked about a few minutes ago, but the other piece is like the students' actual actions when they are when they are practicing in their reading. So the biggest thing I stress to students first and foremost is the difference between passive reading and active reading. So passive reading is when you're staring at something that's super boring and you're not invested in it and you're not trying to process it. And so it looks like these words on the screen over here where it just feels like a blur and you're not understanding any of it. Versus active reading, which, looks like this side of the world. When you have that ability and then that you can write in your books, actively interacting with the books can help you retain stuff better. Now, if you have like a library book or something like that, then obviously you shouldn't be underlining in a library, but the idea behind active reading, no matter what you have to your advantage or not in terms of physically interacting with it, is taking information and turning it into your own thoughts. The more you can take the thing that someone else says and put it into the words that make sense for your brain, the longer you're going to retain it and the better off you're going to be. Because short-term memory lasts about 30 seconds, which is why if you're bored and distracted and you're staring at words, they're going to go in and out and not click. But long-term memory can last for years and can be really effective. And you can remember some of those books that you read as a kid that still resonate in your head, even though you've never really looked at those books since, right? I was talking to my son about The Giver the other day, and I can remember most of the story of The Giver, and the last time I read The Giver was his age. So I feel like that's kind of impressive in itself. So the key thing that we want to think about is that we learn in 3 different ways. So as we're thinking about retaining information and learning to read more actively, which is a skill set that we need to develop for school, right? For life, just in general, are great things to be working on. We learn by seeing things We learn by hearing things, and we learn by doing things. So visual learning, which is why I have a PowerPoint and I'm just not talking to you as a talking head. Auditory learning, which is why I'm talking to you and not just flipping through slides on a PowerPoint. And then kinesthetic learning is the learning by doing, by interacting, by writing. So potentially, I don't know, I can't see you guys, but maybe you're writing notes, scribbling some thoughts to yourself as you go of what takeaways are. But that interaction there adds a dynamic, adds a longevity to the learning that you're doing. It takes it from a passiveness of like, you could be listening to this while you're baking and doing something very different. And so it's kind of going in one ear and out the other versus the active interacting with it, actively looking for how to transcribe it into your own thoughts, which as we're reading information, that's the skill that will help us retain. The more a student can practice making decisions on what matters and what doesn't to them, the longer it retains. So here are some questions that students can ask themselves as they're thinking about that, right? Do I often think about the author's point of view when I read? Do I have trouble finding something after I've finished reading it? How often do I visualize it? How often do I get a picture and a mental image of it? What kind of reading do I do that more and less in? And then how could I help myself to become better at this? How do I pay attention and try to read things more effectively? How do I get that visual? How do I get that ownership of material? In terms of reading on the screen, right, there's a big difference between reading a paper and reading on screen. One of the key things is that screens will alert you about 1,000 other things as you're reading on them, right? Whether it be the computer, the tablet, the phone, whatever, you're going to get some notifications that pop up. So if you're focused on reading something on the tablet or phone and you want to commit a certain amount of time to doing it, turning off distractions will help a lot. The other thing that's really interesting is that when we read something physically, we're reading the words and we're reading the connections. We're also reading where it is located on the page. So if you can imagine something you've read recently physically, you not only can remember the idea of it, you can remember sort of where it was on the page and how it connects with other pieces of it, which when we're reading something on our phones isn't going to happen the same way, right? Because we're constantly sort of scrolling through it. So everything sort of lives right in the middle of our phone as we're scrolling. The best thing we can do for ourselves is instead of just constantly scrolling, stop, read everything on that screen, then scroll it up, read everything on that screen. So the less scrolling you're doing, the better you retain information. And then as appropriate, taking notes to yourself to retain is going to be really helpful too. And then more reading goals, right? So asking yourselves, why did the author write this text? What are they trying to convince me of? What's the specific section focused on? What are the key details I should know? What was hard to follow? What's coming next? Can I predict where this story is going? All those things are great ways to start to think more actively about the material instead of reading it without connections. Now, the other side of it is like, what about the STEM side? The STEM side's trickier because whereas reading, you're building a skill set that you're going to use in a lot of different ways. Thinking about like the math side of the world is often thinking about what math we're coming up to or what science we're about to learn, which changes often for most students between one year and another. I see someone's trying to ask a question with their hand raised. If you chat that in the question and answer, I will be the easiest way for me to be able to answer it because I cannot unmute you for you to ask a question directly in that capacity. So if you were raising your hand, feel free to chat it over and I'll answer it as soon as I can. So the STEM side of the world, the trickiness here is like, right, I can continue to work on my algebra, but I might be taking geometry next year. So what does it look like and where do I put my time? So thinking about more holistically skill sets, right? So finding some apps that are STEM learning, but also can be fun. I'm a big fan of those, working through trying to build out some skill set and getting that sort of edutainment moment from it. A lot of them are built out in ways that will give you rewards as you work through them and stuff. Working on developing spatial skills, building a project, simple projects, crazy elaborate projects, but the more a student can work on not only their like math skill, but also their spatial skill, that will help them long-term in a lot of different capacities. Watch some YouTube, learn some boot camps from YouTube. You can learn some really cool stuff. Coding was a fun example that my student gave me, that they were learning to code by just watching YouTube videos over the summer. That's exciting. And then physical learning books, I think, are really great too. I'm a big proponent of them. I've got one sitting a little out of reach over there that my son's working on right now. Not right this second, but during the summer to help reiterate some of the math that he learned this last year to make sure it retains a little bit longer. I'm also a big fan of puzzle books, right? There's lots of different options for puzzle books of just logic puzzles, word search puzzles, brain teasers, Sudoku, things like that, that just the regular interactions of them will keep the brain going and thinking in those capacities, which will be useful long-term. So go crazy with puzzle books. That's the answer to everyone's problem. We should do more puzzle books as a species, just in general. And then other good advice is find the thing that you get excited about and see if you can find a way to learn with it too. So is it cooking? How do we learn more effectively our STEM side of learning through cooking or through robotics or through photography or whatever it is? Like, let's find the thing that gets that student excited and figure out how do we connect it in a way where it doesn't ruin the excitement of it, but also helps them learn better, right? Learning fractions a lot by cooking is a very common but good thing to learn because fractions, everyone hates them, but they're going to be very important. Here's an Applerouth plug. We've got a fun book. I don't have it right here next to me. Normally I do, but we've got a fun book that is the Applerouth Guide to Academic Success that focuses on how do you learn, how do you handle stress and anxiety, how do you take better notes, and how do you prepare ahead of time for classes. This is a book that I'm using a lot with students over the summer of thinking ahead. And I think it can be a good, fun, short book for students to be working on over the summer as well. You can buy it from our website. So just a plug. Couldn't help myself. All right, and our last little bit is talking about colleges, thinking about, well, what can I be doing over the summer to be getting ready for colleges? And I'm going to base this on students' age grouping. So I'm going to think mostly on high school students. If you are not a high school student yet, then I would say the best thing to do to think about colleges is to ask your parents where they went. But that's it. From there, thinking about freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, rising freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, let's say it that way. What are the things that you can be doing over the summer to not overdo it, but to be thinking about college in an effective way? The first one is to make sure that you are planning ahead on how to make sure your GPA is in a good spot. As a freshman, you have the time to build out a solid GPA, right? We're going to be looking at your freshman, sophomore, and junior GPA, and then as you go into senior year where you're at. But that is always going to be my first answer, is that GPA is going to be an important part of the puzzle. Building out time management and study skills, learning how to keep a checklist, a calendar, a planner, all those pieces of the puzzle. This is the opportunity to practice and fail and learn from it over the summer, so that when you're in school in the fall, you don't have the same struggle, right? Learning how to keep track of your homework, because teachers aren't going to be hunting you down as much as you go into high school. Learning how to keep track of your day-to-day activities and where you need to be. Learning how to build out a calendar on your phone or wherever to keep track of it. All that is going to be really important. And then the other thing is find that thing that you get excited about. What gets you happy, and how can you be more involved in it? Is it a sport? Is it a club? Is it whatever extracurricular it is? What can you be doing to start to learn and be more active in it? As a sophomore, as a rising sophomore, again, I'm going to give you all those same answers. Keep your grades up, work on your study skills and your time management, and get involved in something. But you can start thinking about colleges now. Like, let's not do research and learn about crazy lots and lots of colleges, but let's find out about the colleges that are near us. Let's talk to older friends who are actually doing that college research, or people who have gone to college, and find out what has excited them about college recently. And start to think about like what classes you like over others, because potentially that will be something you'd want to major in, or at least focus on in college. And so as you're thinking about the colleges, what are the things that you'd want to study there? And what are the things you wouldn't want to study there? Can help you start to think through that world. And then start thinking about testing. Is your PSAT in range of national merit? Should we start thinking about studying for the PSAT? You will be taking a PSAT as a sophomore. And so let's get those results. We'll get them in December, and that will help us, that we're thinking a little ahead now, not as much summer, but as we're thinking about sophomore year, taking that PSAT, getting those results, and then what does it mean to, by junior year, be able to get to that national merit side of it, right? And then potentially getting a practice SAT or ACT. I would say rising juniors definitely need to have a sense for if they need to be taking a test or not. And if so, which test should they be taking? That's the first step they should be thinking about. So when I'm asked about when should you be thinking about the SAT or ACT, my first question is always, what extracurriculars are you doing and how busy are they going to make you? Because you shouldn't be testing for this when you also have like 2 sports you're playing at the same time, and you're in the play, and you've also committed to the debate club. You've got too much on your plate at that point. So how do we plan ahead and plan around those extracurriculars? How do we make sure we're planning ahead for our GPA? Junior year GPA is the most important GPA in terms of colleges, and colleges would rather see GPA getting better long term from freshman, sophomore, junior than going down. Like, they love flat. If it's good, keep it good. But they'd rather see an uphill increase in growth and learning than a downhill, everything got hard for me moment. Start thinking about, well, what colleges should we tour in the spring? And then make sure you're involved in some extracurriculars, because next year when you're a senior, we should be thinking about leadership positions in those extracurriculars, so we can have those on our college application. We should make sure we're thinking about our classes, make sure we can end that fall semester strong. If we haven't finished the SAT, ACT, we need to knock that out of the park, because the last test that we should be taking is December. And I know December feels like forever from now, but it will catch up pretty quick. And then get some college tours in there if we haven't already. All those things are good pieces of the puzzle. I have someone who asked me a question about that directly, and I want to make sure I answer it. So I took the SAT. I'm a 10th grader. I took the SAT over the summer. I got a 1400. Is that a good score? So I love the good score questions, because that really depends on what schools you're looking at as to what a good score is. I think a 1400 is a great score, and you should be really proud of it as a 10th grader. I don't know if you're a rising 10th grader or a rising 11th grader, but either way, that's a great score to have. My first best recommendation to you is to start looking at colleges and seeing, does that line up with what colleges I'm interested in? Because if it does, then you're in a great spot and you're free and you don't have to think about the test anymore. And if it doesn't, and you want to push yourself harder, then putting a game plan together now over the summer to go ahead and knock it out and get that score even higher is a great idea. But the cool, weird thing about the SAT and the ACT is there's no good score. There's a score that makes sense for the colleges you're interested in. So the next step is figuring out what are the colleges you're interested in, which is a good, fun research plan that you can put together for the next, couple of weeks in the summer or something. All right. So that is our big presentation. I really appreciate your time, everyone. The big thing here at Applerouth, the thing that we care about and are focused on, is this idea of, like, when you change students' self-beliefs, you change their lives. And you can see that the theme here is, how do we help students become active participants in this decision-making process in a way that they feel like they can make good decisions, retain it, and show growth from it, right? That's a common theme here. And so how do we continue that thought process? Well, here at Applerouth, we do a lot of coaching, we do a lot of test prep, we do a lot of tutoring. We'd love to help you guys in whatever capacity that is. Executive function coaching is helping students build out these skill sets long-term who struggle with doing it themselves. Test prep is getting ready for that SAT, ACT side of the world, and academic tutoring is helping make sure that you can pass your classes and do well and become lifelong learners in that capacity. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we are currently have a fun summer sale going on. So definitely go to applerouth.com. It's straight there on the front page, so you can just go to applerouth.com, but you can also go to applerouth.com/summer, and you can learn a whole lot and save a lot of money on any of these things over the summer. So please definitely check it out. All right, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and open up for questions. So feel free to chat me in the question and answer box, anything you have. I really appreciate your time, and I'm going to leave this one up. Shameless self-promotion. So feel free to throw any questions you have in the chat box. All right. Well, I'll take that I answered everyone's questions perfectly and I did my job right. So I appreciate it, everybody. Everyone have a great evening. Oh, I got one. Cool. I'll answer it. But anyway, everyone have a great evening. The question I have is that the Princeton Review 2023 book helpful? There are a lot of Princeton Review books. I imagine that particularly you're talking about like an SAT or ACT review book. I have not seen the 2023 Princeton Review, but I do know on average those Princeton Review books are good. So yeah, I would say go for it. You're probably not going to be in a bad place because the last couple of editions have been great and the ones before as well. So I imagine they've not ruined it in the latest edition. All right. Well, thank you all so much. Have a great evening and let us know if we can do anything for you. We really appreciate your time.